All right, let's get right into a story that starts with something you probably heard of before. A simple dare on a school trip. But this one ends in a way you could never see coming. It's a terrifying look at how a simple quest for bragging rights can turn into a desperate fight to survive.
So, the story we're diving into actually ends with this one haunting line. If only those three friends had known this. Wow, it just drips with regret, right? It hints that this whole tragedy could have been avoided. So what was it? What was the one piece of information they were missing? To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning.
So, Chapter 1 of this nightmare kicks off on what was supposed to be a totally normal school trip, one that never actually made it to its final stop.
Picture this. A whole busload of students is on its way to Shimla, but late at night, the bus breaks down. Help isn't coming till morning, so they have to check into the only place for miles. In this hotel, it is completely isolated. I'm talking surrounded by a sea of thick, dark woods and massive mountains. It feels like they're at the end of the world.
So, from the safety of their hotel room, our three main characters, Ayush, Aman, and Rohan, are looking out into the pitch-black night. And that's when they see it. Deep in the forest, something is glimmering. It's a mysterious lake, shining like a tiny light in all that darkness.
And that single glimpse of the lake, well, it plants a seed, an idea that pretty quickly grows into a very, very dangerous dare.
Their whole plan is basically fueled by wanting to be popular. They heard stories about kids from a previous trip who became instant legends for pulling a similar stunt. And the plan itself seems so simple, right? First, wait for the security guard to nod off. Second, sneak out. Third, find that lake. And fourth, the most important part, take a picture to prove they did it. What could go wrong?
Well, here's what could go wrong. The forest plays tricks on you. That lake that looks so close, it was an illusion. They end up walking for almost an hour, going deeper and deeper into these creepy, silent woods. The temperature starts to drop. The darkness becomes total, and that initial thrill they felt is completely gone. Now, they're just lost.
And you can just see the change right here. Then, an hour ago, this was a fun dare. They could see the hotel lights, they were feeling confident. But now it's a scary reality. They're in a pitch-black forest, and that confidence has been replaced by just pure fear. And the final blow? They check their phones. Of course, no service. They are completely on their own. The dare is over. Now they just have to get back.
But the moment they decide to turn back is the exact moment this little misadventure turns into something else entirely. This is where the real horror begins.
So Ayush and Aman get their phone flashlights out, trying to cut through the darkness and find their way back. They walk for a few minutes without talking, and then that awful feeling sinks in. Something's wrong. They turn around, and Rohan is just gone, vanished into the dark.
They start calling his name, but nothing comes back but the sound of rustling leaves. And then they hear a new sound. It's not footsteps. It's the steady, rhythmic scraping. It's the unmistakable sound of someone digging into the cold, hard ground.
They follow the sound, super cautiously, and they peek through the trees, and what they see just doesn't compute. It's their friend, Rohan. He's on his hands and knees, frantically digging a hole in the middle of the jungle floor with his bare hands.
When Rohan finally looks up at them, his eyes, they aren't his. They are just solid black, bottomless pits, and he looks at them with this insane rage. When Aman steps forward to ask what's wrong, Rohan shoves him with this superhuman strength that sends him flying. And then, just as suddenly, Rohan's body just convulses and he collapses, totally unconscious.
But that was just the beginning. The horror is about to ramp up big time, leading them to a place of even deeper darkness and a terrifying secret hidden in some old ruins.
Ayush manages to shake Rohan awake, and thankfully, his eyes are back to normal. He's confused, but he's himself again. But as soon as one friend comes back, another is taken. Ayush looks over at Aman, who's been sitting there in total shock. But when Aman looks up, his eyes are now the same horrifying pitch black. And before anyone can react, he leaps up and just sprints away, deeper into the forest.
So what do? They chase him. Ayush and the now terrified Rohan run after Aman, and the chase leads them to a clearing. And in that clearing stands an old, run-down house. You know, the classic ruin that looks like it's been rotting away for 100 years.
And inside, the scene is pure nightmare fuel. Their friend Amen is just floating there, suspended in midair, and whispering to him is this horrifying old woman. Her face is just twisted with evil. And as you can see here, she has the same soulless black eyes, her skin is sagging, her white hair is a mess. This is the thing that's been tormenting them. Seeing this, they're frozen with fear for about a second before pure instinct kicks in. They start a desperate escape that leads right to the story's tragic end.
They don't even scream, they just turn and they run. But the old woman gives chase. The original story actually describes her movement in this really chilling way. It says she crawled down the stairs like an insect, scuttling after them with this terrifying, unnatural speed.
They're running completely blind, branches tearing at them until they finally burst out of the trees and stumble into the open, only to find themselves standing right at the edge of the water. It's the very lake they were searching for hours ago. The place they went for glory has now become the backdrop for pure terror.
In their panic, both Ayush and Rohan trip and fall straight into the freezing water, and instantly they feel something grabbing them, pulling them down. Ayush manages to fight and kick his way back to the surface, and he scrambles onto the bank. But he turns back just in time to watch, helpless, as Rohan is dragged under the dark water for the very last time. The shock is just too much, and he blacks out.
And this brings us to the next morning, in the final, awful piece of the puzzle that explains everything. A story of a spirit's unfinished business. Ayush wakes up, and he's in his hotel bed. For one fleeting second, he must have hoped it was all just a horrible nightmare. But then he looks outside. He sees the flashing lights of police cars, and on the ground, under white sheets, are the bodies of his two best friends, Rohan and Amen. It was all real.
So why? Why did all this happen? The local police share an old legend. As you can see on this timeline, years ago, a woman lived a quiet life in that same house in the woods. But some greedy villagers attacked her one night to steal her home. They murdered her, and they threw her body in the lake. And ever since, her angry, vengeful spirit has wandered those woods. That was the story the three friends didn't know.
And this whole thing leaves us with one final, unsettling question. I mean, there's no doubt the boys were victims of a terrifying ghost, but that ghost was created by a very human act of violence and greed. So it really makes you wonder, when a place is haunted, is it the spirit we should be afraid of, or should we be more afraid of the human cruelty that made the ghost in the first place?